Hello everyone, Usher here and welcome to our video describing the basics of nuts and bolts. Nuts and bolts are a semi-permanent method for joining together parts or materials. Nuts and bolts are used in applications where you require the ability to remove the joint in the future with minimal damage or wear. This is a nut, this is a bolt, and this is how nuts and bolts go together. Now for some quick terminology. The terms bolt and screw are sometimes used interchangeably. There's some disagreement about the technical distinction between these terms, but they can be defined by their use. A bolt is used in applications where there is access to both sides of the part and is secured by bolting with a nut. This would usually be called a bolt because you can see there's no threading here and threading at the end. So it can pass through the piece and then be bolted from the other side. A screw is screwed into an internally threaded hole. This would usually be referred to as a screw because you can see there is threading along the entire length, which means it can be screwed completely into an internally threaded hole. For the remainder of this video, we will mostly be discussing bolts, but the information will also apply to screws. Nuts and bolts come in a range of sizes, differentiated by three measurements: their diameter, length, and thread pitch. Bolt diameter is often the most important dimension when selecting an appropriate bolt. When selecting a bolt, the stated diameter is typically, in fact, the thread diameter, measured from thread tip to tip. Thread diameter is measured in millimeters for metric size bolts. Here you can see an M6 screw, M denoting metric and 6 meaning 6 millimeters in diameter. The diameter of imperial sized bolts is measured in inches. Here you can see these drill bits have the size noted in fractions of an inch. Thread pitch refers to the distance between each thread measured in millimeters. To use a nut and bolt together, they must be matched in thread diameter and pitch. The same goes for matching a screw to an internally threaded hole. Typically, nuts and bolts are tightened by rotating clockwise. This is called a right-handed thread. Some specialty applications require the opposite. This is called a left-handed thread, where we now rotate counterclockwise to tighten the bolt. Nuts and bolts typically require a tool to tighten and loosen them. The tool required depends on the type of bolt used. Some of the most common bolts and associated tools are Phillips head, flathead, Allen, hex bolt, and spanner. When installing a bolt, always ensure you use the correctly sized tool and do not over tighten it. Washers are a component commonly used in conjunction with a nut and bolt. Washers are used for a variety of reasons, including to spread out the force at the connection to the part or material, avoiding wear or damage, or to reduce the friction between the bolt and the material. Nuts and bolts are susceptible to loosening over time, especially when subjected to prolonged strain or vibrations. Three common ways to reduce nut and bolt loosening over time are using a nylock nut. The rubber seal you can see helps keep it in place. Using a nylock nut requires you to use a spanner to tighten or loosen the bolt. Spring washers, which keep a slight but constant force on the screw at all times. Thread locking fluid, commonly referred to by the brand name Loctite. This is applied as a fluid to a bolt and then left to set, binding the nut and bolt together. This concludes our video on the basics of nuts and bolts. Thank you for watching.